I was bringing Michael Austin. He is the director of the Sandelin Center for Entrepreneurial Government in Wichita, Lawrence, Kansas, I should say. And he has been an advisor to the governor of Kansas. He knows his economic stuff. So, did I make any mistakes, Michael, in my run up to reparations that you heard? Do you disagree with anything I said?
No, not at all. Reparations, if done, would be, my word, the largest government handout the country would ever see. And it's going to be as effective in solving race relations as the New Deal and war on poverty were effective in growing the economy, right? So, in other words, a complete disaster. We here at the Kansas Policy Institute educate. Government agencies can only do one thing and one thing well, and that's give out government handouts. We really need to empower the people to be the best version of themselves. That's the best way to see equality out there.
Okay, so what do you say to a person who says, listen, Michael, um, my relatives, my ancestors were enslaved. Then after that, they couldn't get an education. They had to move to Michigan to make a living. They had to live in a ghetto. They didn't pass down any legacy, any material things to their children. And that cycle of poverty and that cycle of deprivation lasts up to this minute. Aren't we entitled, we, the victims of slavery, all these years later, aren't we entitled to some government help? How would you answer that?
Well, there already is government help, but you have to also understand we as a society don't, hold people responsible for things that happened in the past. And secondly, when you think about reparations, we're not talking about reparations. Reparations means there's a specific victim and there's a specific perpetrator. We're talking about government handouts. Take myself, for example. My family didn't come to America until well after slavery ended. Do you think Joe Biden and his reparations study are going to take that into consideration and spend fewer dollars? No, of course not. This is functionally no different than canceling student loans or Medicare for all. It's all about massively expanding government handouts.
Now, the President of the United States, Mr. Biden, seems to be on board with handing out as much as he can to so-called marginalized communities, not just African Americans, but there's a whole list. And this is the equity play that he did the first day he was in office. How do you feel about that, giving favorable treatment to so-called marginalized groups?
It depends on what that treatment is, but I think for most of the for most arguments, you don't create equity, you don't create justice by making one group worse off than the other. And second, this talk about free stuff, either free healthcare or free tuition or even reparations, it's all about taking people's hard-earned money and spending it in the most flamboyant way possible, regardless of the results.
Why do you think that 90% of African American voters continue to support the Democratic Party in places like Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, when their whole society is falling apart around them? Crime is crazy. Poor people are suffering, being murdered by the thousands. Why do they still support the people who don't seem to be able to help them?
Well, let me flip that question a little bit. Why do politicians keep pushing these race baiting tactics and policies? And my answer to that would be it's like football. The politicians are going to keep running the reparations, the race hustling tactics until, the other side figures out how to stop it. And if the left continues to get more support for socialism and wealth redistribution from doing these types of tactics, then the more that they're going to do it. So the only thing that we can do as a society, I think, is present our elected officials with two simple questions. At what cost and what evidence do you have? At the Kansas
But
Policy
even if you
Institute.
do that, you're not going to convince the politicians because they're going to buy as many votes as they can buy. We all know that. But the folks, the regular folks, I can't answer the question. You go to the Bronx and Brooklyn where I live and you see that it's totally out of control. There's no public safety at all. Yet the folks continue to vote in the people who hurt them. And I don't get it. Last word.
I think what's most important is when you set those questions as what the cost is, what is the evidence, you'll find very many policies the far left can push through those questions. And you're right. So much of this year, the society has had a mindset that just seems contrary to Dr. King, right? Which is holding yourself to the content of your character. I have learned that making good choices, finding a job, treating others with kindness can go a long way in providing anyone a life that is spare. And we just have to get that word out there again.
All right, Michael, thanks very much for helping us out. We appreciate it.